You're watching Narrify.
I used to think that marriage was supposed to be simple or at least survivable. A partnership, a quiet promise that no matter how hard life got, you'd always have someone watching your back. I married Madeline in Seattle, Washington, thinking I'd found that person. She was clever, charming, and impossible not to like. People said she had a way of making everyone feel special, like they were the only person in the room. That charm hid something else, though. Something subtle, manipulative, and dangerous. We had 2 kids, Eli, 7, and Sophie, 4. Life was busy, chaotic at times, but routine kept things steady. I worked long hours as a project manager for a local construction firm. Madeline split her time between freelance graphic design projects and managing the household. First, everything felt normal. Then the small things began. The first warning signs were almost imperceptible. She would disappear for quick errands, sometimes for hours. Her phone was always face down, screen locked, and she had suddenly become protective of it in ways she'd never been before. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe her. I had to. It wasn't until one Friday evening that I caught the first real crack in the facade. I had left work early, hoping to surprise her, maybe take her out to dinner. When I drove into the driveway, her car wasn't there. I called her, no answer. An hour later, I received a text, "Sorry, had to run a few things. Be home soon. Don't wait up." Something about that didn't feel right, but I let it slide. That night, after the kids were asleep, I noticed the faint glow of her phone on the kitchen counter. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity overtook me. A notification slid across the screen. New match on Tinder. First, I froze. Tinder? She was on Tinder? I told myself it was a mistake, a glitch, maybe some spam notification, but something in my chest tightened. I opened the app, carefully, almost fearfully, and there it was, her profile smiling at me in pictures I had never seen, with a bio that sounded casual, flirty, and detached. Scrolling through her messages, I realized she wasn't just looking. She had been talking to multiple men, setting up dates, carefully timing everything around my work schedule and our children's routines. My hands shook so hard that I had to sit down. When she came into the kitchen, humming softly, I felt a cold pit open in my stomach. "Everything okay?" she asked. Her voice was casual, but the slightest twitch in her smile made me uneasy. "Who's Adam?" I asked quietly, testing the waters. Her face froze for a fraction of a second. Then she laughed lightly. "Adam? Oh, he's just a friend. You're overthinking, Michael." That laugh, that perfect little mask of calm, was the same one I'd fallen for years ago. But now it was poisonous. Over the next few weeks, I began piecing together the truth. Hotel receipts, cash withdrawals at odd hours. Messages moved from Tinder to Signal, then WhatsApp. She was clever, too clever. Every time I tried to confront her, she turned it around, making me doubt my own observations, calling me paranoid or controlling. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining her at dinner with Adam, smiling, whispering things meant only for him. I felt like a ghost in my own life, watching someone I loved slip further away with every lie she told. I started keeping careful notes, dates, times, receipts, odd patterns. At first, it felt like obsessing, but soon I realized it was necessary. She was manipulative, strategic, and I had to fight back in my own way. One evening, I followed her after she said she was going to a late-night design meeting. She didn't go to a cafe like she claimed. She went to a downtown bar, meeting Adam. I watched from across the street, heart hammering, mind spinning. That image, the casual way she leaned toward him, the way she smiled, etched itself into my memory. I confronted her the next day. She didn't cry. She didn't confess. She just tilted her head, looked at me calmly, and said, "You're imagining things again. Why do you always assume the worst?" And just like that, she had me doubting myself again. The psychological war began. Every word I spoke, every question I asked was twisted. She controlled the narrative at home, using the kids as shields, her charm as armor, and my own desire to trust her as a weapon against me. Friends started noticing my distance, my anger, my exhaustion, but she spun it. I was too harsh, too sensitive, overreacting. I was isolated, watching my family from the inside, powerless, desperate to expose her without losing everything. But I learned quickly. She had always been 2 steps ahead. Every attempt to catch her backfired, making her appear innocent, me unstable. The children noticed. Eli asked once, quietly, "Why does mommy look at you like that sometimes?" I didn't answer. What could I say? That the woman he loved, who read him bedtime stories and kissed him goodnight, was capable of betrayal beyond comprehension? I had to play a long game. Patience became my ally. Observation became my weapon. Every detail mattered. Times, receipts, messages, inconsistencies in stories. She was brilliant at masking her tracks, but brilliance can also make one sloppy. And that's what I waited for, the slip. The days after discovering Madeline's Tinder profile felt like walking through a fog. Every interaction at home was loaded with tension I couldn't escape. Her calm, practiced smile and casual tone were now weapons in a war I had barely begun to understand. But I refused to be invisible in my own life. I started documenting everything. Every disappearance, every excuse, every minor inconsistency became a puzzle piece. My phone, my laptop, even a small notebook I kept in my nightstand became my arsenal. I didn't confront her anymore. I waited. Every psychologist I'd ever read about manipulation echoed in my mind. The abuser often reveals themselves through patterns, slips, repetition, overconfidence. The first breakthrough came almost by accident. One Thursday, I picked Eli up early from school because I had a late meeting at work. When we returned home, the kids were quiet, too quiet. I noticed the back door slightly ajar. My heart sank. Madeline wasn't home yet. I scanned the house. Nothing appeared out of place at first. But then, I noticed her purse sitting on the kitchen counter with a small piece of paper sticking out. I picked it up. A handwritten note. "Don't forget dinner with Adam. 8 p.m. Don't worry about Michael." My hands shook. There was no denying it now. She had left instructions for her date, literally in my house, in my sight. I couldn't confront her immediately. I needed more. I began following her movements more carefully, without being noticed. Every coffee shop she claimed to visit, every quick errands trip I tracked. Slowly, patterns emerged. She had a network of casual meetings, carefully timed around my work hours and the children's schedules. I also began noticing the psychological damage she inflicted on the kids. Eli had started to imitate my cautious tone, whispering little warnings or doubts. Sophie had become clingy, constantly checking if I was around. It was subtle, but enough to make me realize the ripple effects of her manipulation. Work, I started devising a plan. If she was clever enough to hide evidence from me, I had to be cleverer. I installed security cameras in common areas of the house, positioned so they didn't feel intrusive but could capture who entered and left. I created an encrypted folder on my laptop, storing screenshots, messages, timestamps, and small financial discrepancies. Madeline was careful, but even the most skilled manipulators leave digital breadcrumbs. Then came the first real slip. One Saturday night, she left the kids asleep and went out, claiming to be attending a networking event. I had her calendar synced to mine without her knowledge. I checked. She wasn't at a networking event. She was at a midtown bar, sitting with a man I recognized from her Tinder profile, Adam. They were laughing, leaning in close, whispering in ways that made my stomach twist. I didn't approach. I just watched, heart racing, mind strategizing. She wasn't careless. She was confident. But overconfidence is dangerous. By observing quietly, I was learning her rhythm, her timing, her patterns of deception. Over the next few weeks, I escalated my evidence collection. Bank statements revealed small, unexplained withdrawals, subscriptions to services she'd never mentioned. A second credit card opened in secret. Each discovery deepened the sense of betrayal, but also sharpened my resolve. Madeline was a master manipulator, but she underestimated my patience. One evening, while going through the security footage, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Adam wasn't just a Tinder fling, he was part of a more extensive pattern. She had multiple profiles, multiple men, each carefully scheduled to avoid overlap, each time leaving subtle psychological breadcrumbs for me. Knowing I would notice discrepancies, yet never enough to confront her safely, I realized then that the game she was playing wasn't just about infidelity. It was control. Every lie, every calculated absence, every manipulation of my perception was designed to destabilize me, make me doubt my own mind. She wasn't reckless. She was strategic. I began to plan the confrontation, not as an outburst, but as a calculated revelation. I needed irrefutable evidence, messages, receipts, witnesses, patterns. I began quietly confiding in one coworker I trusted, someone who had noticed the subtle changes in me and asked questions I hadn't dared answer aloud. Together, we brainstormed ways to document everything without alerting Madeline. Meanwhile, her behavior started to shift, ever so slightly. The confidence she wore like armor began to show cracks. She underestimated my quiet observation. Subtle changes in tone, fleeting hesitations, small slips in stories. Each was a thread I could pull. The first real confrontation was indirect. I asked casual questions about her day, noted her reactions, compared them to my documented evidence. Each inconsistency built a mental map of her deception. She laughed, deflected, gaslight, but I remained patient. Patience had become my most powerful weapon. By the time the first month of active observation passed, I had a full dossier. Calendar, records, screenshots of messages, financial records, security footage, and detailed notes on every suspicious interaction. The puzzle was complete, and now the question wasn't if I confronted her. It was when and how. I knew this confrontation wouldn't be about anger or revenge. It would be about control, clarity, and reclaiming my life. She had been clever, but cleverness cannot outlast methodical observation. And I was ready. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope stretched over a canyon I couldn't see the bottom of. I couldn't confront Madeline openly, not yet. She was cunning, clever, and fully capable of twisting any direct accusation into a story where I was the unstable one. But now, armed with evidence, I had power I hadn't felt in months. It started subtly. I asked casual questions about her day, mentioning errands or meetings she'd told me about. I watched her reactions like a hawk. A pause here, a glance away, a hesitated word. Every little slip was a thread I could tug. I began presenting small, indirect evidence. One evening, I left a printed screenshot of a message from Adam on the kitchen table, as if by accident. When she noticed it, her reaction was almost imperceptible. A flicker of panic, quickly masked by a casual laugh. But it was enough. Enough to know that even the perfect mask could hold forever. At the same time, I observed her with the kids. She was careful, always charming, always attentive, but under pressure, subtle cracks appeared. She would double-check messages before replying. Her smile sometimes a hair too quick, her laughter a fraction too loud. She was balancing deception on a knife's edge, and I was beginning to understand the rhythm of her manipulation. The breaking point came one late evening. I had stayed up, reviewing my evidence, organizing messages, receipts, and notes chronologically. I wanted everything clear, undeniable. When she returned from another meeting, I confronted her, not with anger, but with calm, deliberate precision. "Madeline," I said, my voice even, "I've been reviewing things. I know about Adam. I know about the other men. I know about the secret accounts. I have every message, every receipt, every timestamp. I know everything." For a moment, she looked stunned. That perfectly composed mask faltered for a fraction of a second. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes widening. You've been snooping," she said finally, her tone accusing, defensive. "I've been observing," I corrected gently. "Not snooping, observing. I needed to understand what was happening in my own home." She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "This is ridiculous, Michael. You're imagining things. You've let paranoia take over." But I didn't respond with argument. I simply started laying out the evidence. Screenshots, messages, receipts. Every interaction documented, every lie exposed. She tried to interrupt, tried to spin the narrative, but I let her talk over me briefly, then continued calmly. Piece by piece, the truth I had painstakingly compiled pressed her back into a corner she had never occupied before. Finally, she stopped. Her defenses, usually so sharp, faltered. She realized, in that quiet, tense moment, that her control was gone. How could you? She started, voice shaking. "You made your choices," I said. "I just waited until the truth was undeniable." The next few days were tense. She was careful now, but subtle guilt showed in her behavior. The confidence that had been her shield began to erode. She avoided eye contact, her usual charm no longer a tool for manipulation. I maintained distance, observing every move, cataloging the cracks as evidence of her unraveling. I also began rebuilding my life, quietly but deliberately. Work became an anchor, keeping me grounded and focused. The kids were my priority. I protected them from the psychological fallout, maintaining routines and normalcy as best I could. But I also started taking legal steps, consulting quietly with a lawyer about custody and property, ensuring that my next moves would protect both myself and the children. Madeline tried subtly to regain control. She attempted to charm, to redirect, to manipulate small interactions. But I was no longer her passive observer. Every word she spoke, every gesture, every lie was noted. She underestimated my resolve, my patience, and my ability to reconstruct the truth from the fragments of her deception. Then came the small victories. Friends began noticing inconsistencies in her stories. Subtle slips she didn't realize were visible. Casual questions, remarks from neighbors, even co-workers. These little cracks, amplified by the evidence I had collected, began to isolate her. She realized that the narrative she had controlled for so long was slipping. I began to feel something I hadn't in months. Control. Not over her, not over Adam, but over my life, my narrative. I was no longer reacting. I was acting, strategically, deliberately. Every document I had, every observation I made, every small detail collected, strengthened my position. Madeline sensed it. The subtle shift in power didn't escape her. I watched as she tried, quietly, to regain it, but now she was cautious. Every smile, every word, every gesture was measured, constrained. I realized she had become a prisoner of her own manipulations. The final confrontation, I knew, would come not with anger, but with calm, undeniable evidence. Not for revenge, but for clarity, for justice, for reclaiming my life and the lives of Eli and Sophie from the shadows of deceit. The day of the final confrontation arrived not with fireworks, but with quiet inevitability. I had spent weeks gathering everything: screenshots, messages, receipts, security footage, and detailed notes about her pattern of manipulation. Every lie, every disappearance, every calculated moment of deceit was documented. There was no denying the truth, no room for spin. I waited until the kids were at school, leaving just the two of us in the house. Madeline entered, perfectly calm, smiling that practiced smile that had once drawn me in so easily. But now, I saw it for what it was. A mask stretched thin over cracks she had spent years hiding. I laid out the evidence on the dining table, organized and precise. "Madeline," I said quietly, "this isn't an accusation. This is the truth. I've documented every step of your deception. Every message, every meeting, every hidden account, every lie. I have it all." Her eyes flicked across the papers, and for the first time, she didn't speak immediately. That pause, a brief moment of silence, was more damning than any argument. She realized that her control, carefully maintained for years, was gone. How?" she whispered, voice tight with disbelief. "I watched," I said. "I observed. I didn't react until I could prove it." You underestimated my patience. You underestimated my ability to reclaim my life. She tried to deflect, to charm, to gaslight. Michael, you're overreacting. You're imagining things again. But I didn't argue. I simply presented the evidence. Screenshots of Tinder messages. Bank statements showing secret transactions. Hotel receipts. Security footage from nights she claimed to be elsewhere. Every detail fit together in a way that couldn't be spun or denied. Her face paled. The carefully constructed facade cracked. She stammered, searching for words, searching for an escape, but the truth was absolute. I didn't mean for it to, she began, but stopped. She knew it was useless. The next weeks were tense but decisive. Legal consultations ensured that the children's safety and my rights were protected. Custody arrangements were put in place, ensuring Eli and Sophie would be shielded from further psychological manipulation. Financial accounts were frozen and audited, so her attempts at further deception were thwarted. Madeline tried small manipulations even then, charming interactions, subtle lies, but the pattern had been broken. Her web of deceit, once intricate and controlling, had collapsed. I remained calm, observing, documenting, and acting with deliberate caution. In the days that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I moved the children into a new apartment, creating a safe and stable environment far from the shadow of betrayal. Work became my anchor, focus returning where it had been fractured. The quiet routine of normal life, once taken for granted, became a source of strength. More than anything, I reclaimed my sense of agency. The betrayal, the manipulation, the lies, they had attempted to strip me of identity and control. But by observing, documenting, and acting with strategy, I had reclaimed both. The hardest moments weren't legal battles or financial disputes. They were emotional. Watching the kids grapple with trust, remembering the love I once had for Madeline, and reconciling the woman I married with the one who had deceived me so thoroughly. But over time, those wounds began to heal, replaced with clarity, resilience, and self-awareness. I learned, painfully and irrevocably, that love can be weaponized, trust can be exploited, and those closest to us can harbor betrayal. But I also learned that patience, observation, and careful action can reclaim what seems lost. Some nights, when the city outside was quiet and the children slept safely, I reflected on everything. I had lost a house, a marriage, and the naive sense of security I once carried. But I had gained insight, strength, and a profound understanding of human nature. Madeline's manipulations were no longer my burden. She had underestimated me, as she underestimated the consequences of her actions. The life I rebuilt was quieter, smaller in some ways, but it was mine. Steady, grounded, and free from deception. And as I watched Eli and Sophie laugh and play in the safety of our new home, I knew the truth that mattered most. Survival isn't about avoiding betrayal. It's about reclaiming your life, your agency, and your dignity, even when the people you trusted most try to destroy it.